I still remember the moment I turned up that winding mountain road, the air sharp with pine and cold sunlight flickering between the trees, thinking I was about to start the next chapter of my life. I'd bought a house up here, well more like a beat-up fixer-up or something I could rebuild with my own hands after the mess of my divorce. I thought it would be quiet, peaceful, just me in the woods. But when I reached the end of the gravel drive, I froze. Smoke was rising from the chimney. My chimney, and someone was grilling in the backyard like they owned the place. I parked and got out, my heart pounding with that weird mix of confusion and disbelief. Maybe it was squatters, maybe a caretaker the realtor forgot to mention, but then I saw her. A woman in her 50s, blonde hair, tied-back sunglasses, perched like she was about to inspect a crime scene. She looked me up and down and said, "You're trespassing on private property." Just like that. No greeting, no curiosity, nothing. I told her calm as I could that I was the new owner, that I'd closed on the place months ago. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Sweetheart," she said, "I manage this property for the homeowners association. You need to leave before I call the sheriff." Her name was Marlene Graves, and in that moment she spoke like the mountain itself had appointed her queen. Behind her, a young guy flipped burgers, acting like this was just another Saturday afternoon. I showed her my papers, the deed, the closing documents, everything. She barely glanced at them before saying, "That means nothing until verified." And then, as if rehearsed, she added, "You've got 5 minutes to leave before law enforcement gets here." I remember walking back to my truck, my hands shaking. I wanted to scream, to demand she explain how the hell she was living in a house I owned, but something about her calm, her certainty, made me realize this wasn't some misunderstanding. This woman genuinely believed she could take what was mine and convince everyone else it was hers. Back in San Francisco, I spent the next 2 days buried in research. Turns out this place, Silver Ridge Estates, had an HOA older than most of its residents. Their website was full of polished slogans about community harmony and preserving property values. And there she was, Marlene Graves, listed as president, smiling like a realtor in a luxury ad. The bylaws gave her ridiculous authority, including something called protective management, which basically let the board take over neglected homes. My realtor brushed it off when I called, saying it was standard legal fluff. But when I asked why Marlene was living in my house, she went quiet and mumbled something about ongoing maintenance issues before hanging up. I didn't sleep much after that. Every instinct told me I'd walked straight into something much bigger, a trap dressed up in legalese. So I called a local attorney named Dean Sanders. His office was this old Victorian with creaky floors and a coffee smell that hadn't left since the 70s. Dean listened, took notes, and finally said, "You're not crazy. I've seen this before." Then he pulled a file from a drawer thick with paper. "There's a pattern. HOA presidents like her have been twisting laws to seize houses from absentee owners. The trick is to make the real owner look like the intruder." He showed me a name, someone named Victor Tran, who'd lost his cabin to the same HOA 2 years earlier. I found Victor in Oregon, and when I called, the first thing he said was, "She got you too, huh?" He sent me everything. Letters, invoices, fake fines, even photos of Marlene's son living in his place. Seeing it all in one folder made my stomach twist. It wasn't just me. She'd done this before, over and over. The next week, Dean and I drove back up the mountain together. I wasn't about to confront her alone again. When we pulled into the driveway, Marlene was already waiting at the door, her arms crossed like she'd been expecting us. Dean introduced himself, handed her his card, and said, "We're here to clarify ownership." She didn't even flinch. "This matter's settled," she said. "The property's under HOA jurisdiction." Dean smiled slightly. "No, ma'am, it isn't. We've reviewed the bylaws. There's no clause granting seizure rights for unpaid or disputed fees. You're occupying private property." For a second, she froze. Just a flicker. Then she smoothed it out and snapped back. The bylaws were amended 2 years ago. I have full authority. Dean tilted his head. Funny, he said, because the county recorder doesn't have those amendments on file. That did it. Her face went pale, then red, then cold again. Get out, she said, her voice trembling with fury. You city people think you can bully small towns with your lawyers. You're not taking this house. We left before she called the cops, but we both knew she'd crossed from confident to cornered. Dean told me in the truck, she's hiding something. She's not just enforcing HOA rules, she's profiting off them. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Victor sent over bank statements he'd subpoenaed during his case, showing HOA funds being funneled straight into Marlene's personal account. Then I dug through her son's public social media photos of him in homes that didn't belong to them, tagged right there in Silver Ridge. Every management project matched a house that had mysteriously changed hands. It was all there in black and white. We brought everything to a county investigator named Detective Riley Green. She didn't say much at first, just listened and flipped through the files. When she finished, she said, "You didn't bring me a complaint. You brought me a criminal operation." Within a week, she got a warrant. And when they searched Marlene's home office, they found everything fake. HOA letters, bank transfers, handwritten notes about targeting absentee buyers. She called it her acquisition protocol. It was like a playbook for stealing homes. But here's the twist. Marlene still tried to spin it. Her lawyer filed a harassment suit against me, claiming I'd trespassed and defamed her reputation. That move backfired hard. It drew even more attention from investigators, and within days they froze her accounts and seized her files. When they arrested her, she was still insisting she was the victim, saying she'd only protected community assets. Her son cracked first. He confessed to everything, helping forge documents, setting up fake utility accounts, even threatening owners who resisted. He broke down sobbing in front of Detective Green, saying, "She told me they were just abandoned houses, that we were helping." When the case hit court, the whole community turned out. Neighbors who used to defend her sat there in disbelief as prosecutors showed emails, receipts, and recordings of Marlene bragging about cleaning up lazy owners. She'd stolen over a dozen properties, embezzled HOA funds, and bullied anyone who questioned her. By the time the judge read her sentence, 20 years for organized fraud, the room was silent, except for the sound of someone crying. I think it was her son. A few months later, I finally stood inside my mountain house again. My house, and for the first time it felt like it actually belonged to me. The renovations she'd made were expensive, beautiful even, but they carried her fingerprints like ghosts. I repainted everything, changed the layout, made it mine from the ground up. What surprised me most, though, was how the community changed. The same people who once sided with her began reforming the HOA from scratch. New audits, public budgets, open meetings. Even Detective Green came to the first town barbecue we held after the trial. She told us this case was already changing state law, inspiring new protections against HOA abuse. A year later, I got a letter from Marlene in prison. She claimed she'd been misunderstood and that everyone exaggerated. I didn't reply. Some people never learn, but her downfall taught me something I'll never forget. That power without accountability will always rot from the inside. Now, when I sit on that deck watching the sun fall behind the pines, I think about how close I came to losing everything. Not because someone broke in with a gun, but because they walked in with a smile, a clipboard, and a fake title. If you were in my shoes, facing someone who took your house and acted like you were the trespasser, what would you have done? Would you fight back, or would you just walk away? Tell me in the comments what justice means to you, and whether you think people like Marlene deserve a second chance. And if this story hit you the way it hit me, share it, subscribe, and stay alert, because sometimes the real thieves don't break your locks, they rewrite the rules.